A fresh start, new faces, more opportunities to prove yourself. The 2021 season is upon us, and we're ready to get back to it. All you need to know about spring games and more coming up next on Heisman Talk.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Heisman Talk, our first of 2021 season. D, it's good to have you back.
Man, I'm excited to be back. It's been a long time, but I'm ready to get back and get back to it, man. I'm ready.
Absolutely. It has been about 6 or 7 months since we last filmed an episode here at Heisman Talk, partly because of work schedules and stuff like that, and partly because it was really a unique season for all of college football, as y'all know. And Dee and I felt that it was best to take off the rest of the season, regroup, and come back this year. And we're refueled. I think we needed the break, and we're ready. We're ready to be back. So, Dee, with that being said, we've got a few spring games happening this weekend. A couple of them big ones in the SEC, including Alabama and Georgia. Of course, Alabama's coming off of a national title, but they lose a lot of key players. Dee, what can you tell me about Nick Saban's team for 2021 so far?
Yeah, like you said, they have a lot of question marks, whether it be at, wide receiver, whether it be at quarterback, offensive line, they're losing a lot of guys, and so, it's all about, it's not necessarily about how they look in the spring, but it is about, how those guys fill into those positions. And, one guy that, everybody's looking at, everybody has their eyes on Bryce Young at quarterback. That's the main guy. Everybody's looking at him and they're trying to figure out if he's going to be the guy. He's not very tall in stature, but he's a very athletic kid. And, he has a great arm. And so, we're really going to see, how Bryce Young looks this year. And, I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to see John Mechie at receiver. He's stepping in and, he made some plays last year. And, he's a very, very talented receiver. So we'll see what they look like on offense this year.
Yeah, Dee, and you talk about the offensive side. I'll be curious to see how their defense looks. In the past few years, Nick Saban's defense hasn't looked like it has early on when he first started at Alabama. They lose a key secondary player in Patrick Surtain to the draft. So I wonder who's going to take over as captain of the defense. Obviously, they'll be reloading, but that's going to be one of the biggest things I look for in this year's spring game is who's going to step up in the secondary for the Alabama Crimson Tide. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, like you said, Patrick Surtain's a big piece, and they're also losing the quarterback of their defense in Dylan Moses. He's going to the draft. He was a senior last year, so it's going to be tough for them in an uphill battle for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So another team that's going to be coming after Bama this year is none other than the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia brought in transfer JT Daniels last year, but we didn't really get to see him much until the end of the year due to a previous ACL tear. But he really stepped it up in the last few games of the season. Dee, what are the Georgia Bulldogs going to look like without George Pickens going into the fall?
I'm interested to see, how they look. I think that they'll be fine. I think George Pickens is a top tier receiver, even, in next year's draft. It does hurt them, but I think that the way that Kirby has recruited and the receiver coach there has recruited, I think that they'll be fine just with, Don Blaylock should be coming back. You got I am losing track of his name right now. Jermaine Burton. Jermaine Burton's coming back. You have a lot of guys that can step into that role, and become a phenomenal receiver. You have Arian Smith, the speedster, coming in and actually, not being hurt at the beginning of this season like he was last season. And so you have a lot of guys that can stretch the defense and even go across the middle and make tough catches. And so, I think they'll be fine without George Pickens, and hopefully they'll be able to get back George Pickens. I think it really all falls on, how the offensive line plays this year and how, JT Daniels, steps up and plays this year.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, D. I want to stay on the offensive side of the ball for the Bulldogs right now. You talk about their wide receiver core, but let's not forget that they have probably one of the two best tight ends in the country, and Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers, incoming freshmen. So I think that's really going to help Todd Monken's offense out tremendously. Not to mention, they probably have one of the strongest backfields in the nation as well. When you've got Zamir White and a few other guys out there, you can line up James Cook in the slot. You can bring him in the backfield as well. I think it's really going to be one of the most dynamic offenses we see this year, maybe even close to what we saw with Bama last year.
Yeah, they definitely can be, Bama-esque just because, Todd Monken can really dial up plays, and, having an experienced quarterback that can really sling it, around to different receivers will be exciting. On offense, I think that they should fare well on offense. Defensively, I think that they should fare well as well. They're missing, Tyreek Stevenson transferred to Miami. Obviously, that's gonna, hurt. Eric Stokes to the draft, Tyson Campbell to the draft. But, I think that having that front seven back, having guys like, Jordan Davis come back, at the nose tackle, and having Trayvon Walker and guys like that, I think that they'll be okay on the defensive end.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about them, but we've got to get to some other teams. So we'll bring it back up after the spring game next week. We'll see how these players are and evaluate it from there. So we'll come back to that. But for now, let's move on to the ACC. Obviously, Clemson's losing Trevor Lawrence, probably one of the best quarterbacks to ever play college football, and steps sophomore in DJU. We know this Clemson team has rebuilt year after year. Are we going to see a different Clemson this year?
I think you will, just because I think, Trevor Lawrence is a, one of those once in a generation type quarterbacks. And kind of sucks for DJU to be following him up, because he's a heck of a talent, by himself. But he's really got to, take hold of this offense, with them losing, the bell cow and Travis, Etienne. So, it's gonna be tough for them. You have a talented running back coming in Will Shipley, the freshman running back. Probably. I think his name's Lynn J. Dixon, will probably take that running back position, the veteran there. But, I think it'll be tough for Clemson to stay at the top this year. And if they do, it's just, Dabo Swinney, like Nick Saban, they continue to rise to the top,
Absolutely. And like I said, we'll get into a few other teams that will be chasing the Clemson Tigers this fall, such as North Carolina and a few other teams. But let's shift gears. Let's go to the Big Ten. Another team that is losing their star quarterback is the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, obviously, we know that Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence are going back and forth, and who's going to be the best quarterback in the draft. So, obviously, Ohio State is losing a phenomenal quarterback. But just like any other Power 5 conference team, they seem to reload pretty quickly. What's the quarterback situation, and also, how is Ohio State going to fare this year in the Big Ten?
Ohio State is always top tier in the Big Ten. Everybody, knows that. Everybody sees that each year in and year out. I think the guy, that's going to step forward in place of Justin Fields this year is going to be C.J. Stroud. He's a really, really talented quarterback. And he was a 4-star to 5-star last year. Can't remember the exactly star, but he was a highly rated, highly touted quarterback coming, from high school. And I really think he'll step in and he'll be that guy for them this year. He's not the greatest athlete, but he can use his legs, and he has a heck of an arm. And I think he'll definitely step in. And I think Ohio State will definitely be at the top of the Big Ten once again, just because of all the players that he has around him. So.
Yeah, and like you said, the players that he has around him, they obviously bring back an impressive wide receiver core. I think their offensive line has always been stout and will continue to reload. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think as of now, those are probably the top 4 teams that are projected to make it to the playoff. Maybe like an Oklahoma or someone like that will sneak in. We'll have to see. It's a little bit early to predict anything. But with that being said, D, if the season were to start today, who would be one team that's on the outside looking in that could really surprise some people this year?
My surprise pick would be LSU. I'm really interested to see how Ed Orgeron, comes back from what many deem as an unsuccessful season last year. He brought in Bo Pelini as the defensive coordinator last year. He's gone, and their OC is gone as well. So they have a new OC and they have a new DC. And so it's all about with Ed Orgeron is making those home run hires. He made home run hires, or he had Dave Aranda as the defensive coordinator. He made a home run hire and hiring. Goodness. What's the dude's name?
Joe Brady.
Yeah, dang it, thanks. And hiring Joe Brady last year. So with him, it's all about making home run hires, I feel. And we're gonna see if the new OC Jake Peets and the new DC Durante Jones, if they are home run hires this year. But their big thing is their quarterback, and I think that Max Johnson will be the starting quarterback because he played well at the end of last year. And I think he'll beat out Miles Brennan. So,
yeah, and like you said, the quarterback situation is another interesting topic down in Baton Rouge. But I don't think anyone was surprised that the LSU Tigers dropped tremendously last year. They lost 95% of their starters, both coordinators. Last year was kind of a reevaluation time for the Tigers, trying to see, okay, who do we have? A few players opted out, even a few key players. So yeah, I think I don't think Ed Orgeron is going to be on the hot seat this year, but I definitely think he needs to get back to that 8 or 9 win season and really prove himself in the West over an Auburn or an A&M. So yeah, good pick. I'm going to go with the North Carolina Tar Heels. Now, I know before the show we were debating back and forth. I couldn't decide who I wanted. We had talked about Miami, a few teams out west like Arizona State, because the Pac-12 D is wide open this year as well. But I think I'm going to have to settle with the Tar Heels. They were one of my favorite teams last year, and I kind of predicted it, right? If it wasn't for Notre Dame, the Tar Heels would have been sitting in the ACC championship against a really good Clemson team. But D, I know they lose both of their 1,000-yard running backs to the NFL, but don't underestimate Sam Howell and his ability to make plays. I think he can make up for it a little bit, but with Matt Brown as his head coach, I think anything's possible. So look for the Tar Heels to make a run this year in the ACC.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad choice at all. I think North Carolina, with losing those 2 running backs, they might shock some people because people aren't expecting them to do that much. And Clemson could be down a little bit this year, and so if they can slide in and knock them off, then you never know what'll happen. So we'll have to see about that.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's really early in the year. It's only April, so we've got a few months to go. Anything can happen. So we'll continue to evaluate. I look forward to watching the spring games this weekend and the following weekend. We've got a few more games coming up, such as A&M. And I think it's going to be a really excited season. we're really excited to be back on Heisman Talk, and we will continue to cover college football thoroughly this year. And we look forward to having you on with us. So with that being said, continue to stay safe. Be tuning in next week as we'll recap some of these spring games and also give you a preview of spring games to come. As always, this is Nate Dogg and D signing off.